Okay, let's make a start. Yeah, thanks for everyone who's joining us or watching the replay, whether you're tuning in. You are on the right webinar, in the right conversation. If you are either an existing franchisor or maybe this is something that you're looking at franchising your business in the future, that would actually be an ideal situation, because if you're a future franchisor, you can do everything right at the outset, and all of the principles that we're talking about, you can get right from the beginning without trying to unpick some nasty problems. But you want a thriving, profitable, and self-sustaining franchise business that delivers both financial success and personal freedom, does not monopolize your evening, weekends, mental health. So one that's a joy to operate. That's what we're here to try and do. That is quite a big job, so that's why we do this over a series of monthly conversations, looking at individual foundations, one of which is coaching with compassion, which is today's topic. This is going to be a 60-minute session. Hopefully we're going to have about 45 minutes of discussion. There's an asterisk on that, partly because Graham likes to talk and partly because it depends how the conversation goes. If you need to leave early, then yeah, there will be a replay available on Graham's LinkedIn profile straight after the session, pretty much. Discussion, you can talk to us either on the LinkedIn chat or on the Riverside chat. If you're watching on Riverside, however you choose to chat, we will see it. Both myself and Claire will be checking in on the chat to see if you've asked questions, and we'll stop at a couple of points. Yeah, and as I've said, this is the second in a series of monthly conversations. If you missed last month, if you've only just recently connected with us, then do go back and check out last month's. We talked about the 5 steps to a profitable, high value franchise business. So feel free to go back and check out last month's session. I have also been splitting out video snippets of the 5 steps onto Graham's LinkedIn profile, and which will be found if you go to Graham's LinkedIn profile and go to the newsletter tab. There's a newsletter called The Compassionate Leader, and you'll see video clips from last month in there as well. So who are we? As per last month, I'm going to challenge Graham to introduce Frenchology in approximately 60 seconds. This is 60 Graham McKinnon seconds, so strap yourselves in. Graham, go for it.
I'm going to do my best. So, at Frenchology, we help ambitious franchisors and their franchise partners to build purposeful, high-performing franchise networks that they can be proud of. We do that by utilising over 2 decades of my own personal experience, firstly as a franchisor, now as a specialist franchise coach, mentor, consultant, board advisor. I've got a number of roles that I perform. But more importantly, coming out of that, I understand that there are thousands of decisions required to really create a successful franchise. Our purpose is simple but powerful, and it is to transform franchising together. And we partner with franchisors to sharpen strategy, accelerate growth, enhance franchisee performance, and help them to create businesses that not only drive profitability, but also deliver real freedom, both in terms of financial freedom and freedom of time. So whether you're looking to improve recruitment, increase profitability, strengthen franchise relationships, Frenchology provides the clarity, confidence, and tools to make it happen so you can build a franchise that makes a meaningful impact upon you, your business, and is set for long-term success. Was that 60 seconds?
Well done. I'm sure it was closer than last time. Well done.
It was better than 600 seconds, yeah.
Listen, I know it. I can talk for Scotland. I try.
I think what we're talking about is a new way of doing things, a different way of doing things. I think, over the conversations we've had in recent years, we think that franchising can be one of the best ways to scale pretty much any business. I think people often think it's hard or there's too much to learn, and yeah, we want to kind of put to everyone listening that it doesn't have to be that way, that there's a better way of doing things. Jeanette, could you just introduce yourself and the work that you do?
Most definitely. So I wear many different hats, as Graham does. So today I'm here with my Franchology hat on, which is as head of learning and development. So I've been working with Graham for a number of years now and love everything to do with franchising and coaching with compassion, which we're going to discuss later today. I'm also a master executive coach, qualified and accredited, and work with lots of people in all sorts of walks of life, including the franchise partners and franchise operators nationwide.
Perfect. Yeah, towards the end of the session, I'll ask you to put your contact details for anyone listening. But yeah, let's just move on and talk about, well, for someone listening who is new to the term coaching with compassion, I'll put this to you first, Greg. What is coaching with compassion?
You're not going to time me to 60 seconds this time.
No. The floor's yours on this one.
I guess the Franchology definition, for us, it starts with the fact that it's an evidence-based approach, underpinned with decades of research, based on a deep understanding of neuroscience, psychology, and human behavior, but also underpinned with the last 2 decades that I have personally spent in the world of franchising, where I've genuinely seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think, recognizing the unique interdependent relationship that exists between franchisors and the franchise partners, using coaching with compassion is genuinely transformative. And I think I would describe it as starting with genuine care about the people we are privileged to coach. And it differs from what I deployed for years and what most people deploy. It differs from just simply coaching for performance. So where coaching for performance is perhaps much more focused on goals and specific objectives. And in the franchise or franchise partner relationship, that in itself can become quite tricky. Whereas coaching for compassion really takes account and looks at the individual, looks holistically, and develops that resonant relationship between the coach and the coachee.
Your first career was as a nurse, actually, wasn't it? And maybe that holistic approach. Maybe this is a different expression of the same holistic approach of figuring out, well, what's really the matter, what's really wrong.
You're absolutely right, Rob. And when I spent many years nursing, and therefore when I came to the world of franchising 20 years ago, I came with a natural level of compassion. And again, you're absolutely right. In the world of nursing, the reality there from a nursing perspective is to look at the holistic view of every patient that walks through the door. So to be compassionate, to come with a genuine sense of care, I absolutely had that naturally. The beauty now is that, and it's only in recent years that I discovered the amazing work that has been done, the research, the neuroscience that sits behind this by the team at Case Western University in the States. Amazing work done by Richard Boyatzis, by Ellen Van Oosten, by Melvin Smith. And really, for me, it was, we were talking just before we started about the joy that we get from seeing light bulb moments happening in front of our eyes between us as coaches and coachees. But the same thing happened for me with Coaching with Compassion. And when I uncovered the research and the neuroscience that lies behind it, for the first time I was able to understand what I had been doing in many instances naturally, but suddenly discovered that there was real substance and power and process in being able to coach with compassion effectively.
And maybe doing it in a systematic nature that isn't just you personally making decisions on a one-to-one basis.
Again, that's a really insightful point, because over the years, both for myself and for people within the franchise support team who were being asked to go out and coach and or mentor franchise partners, it was regularly really frustrating, because sometimes I had amazing results by deploying what I now know as Coaching with Compassion. Bearing in mind, 10, 15 years ago, I didn't have this level of insight. But the inconsistency, and I now realise in retrospect why and how sometimes what I was actually deploying was just simply coaching for performance. And that, particularly in the franchise or franchisee relationship, if the franchisee, the franchise partner, the coachee in this instance, thinks that all you are interested in as a franchisor is driving performance for your own ends, to drive management service fee income, and not looking at that relationship and perhaps in the right way, and at least if that's how it comes across, if you've not fostered trust, if you're not looking at that relationship with empathy, if you've not created emotional safety, then you're unlikely to unlock that intrinsic motivation and resilience that actually allows the franchise or franchisee relationship not just to succeed, but to thrive and to be that true trusted partner. So I can see now, with retrospect, knowing what I've learned over recent years, because of the research, because of the science, because of understanding the psychology that lies behind this stuff. Now that I understand it, I can look back and see, I can see why and when it worked well. And now I can also see why and when it didn't work well. And the last thing to say on that is, in my experience, both personal and, I worked with significant numbers of franchisees over the years, the reality of that is that nobody typically sets out but to create unintended consequences. But that's exactly what can happen when you don't understand. Yeah, when you don't understand even the basics of coaching, notwithstanding how to use Coaching with Compassion effectively, because both are crucial.
I have a thought on that, but Jeanette, I wanted to come to you and just ask, how did you come to understand Coaching with Compassion, and was there a specific circumstance you can think of where you thought, actually, this is how it...
It's definitely everything that Graham has said. And I think for me, it's about that inherent belief in the wholeness of your client. So when your coachee comes to you, they've got all the resources that they need. If I come in with that belief into the relationship, I'm much more likely to get a positive and psychologically safe, or create a positive and psychologically safe environment to work within. And it then automatically moves across from that transactional type of interaction to a transformational one. So sometimes clients say it's the very first time they've ever been truly listened to. So we work really hard in the beginning to understand what their hopes and dreams are, what their aspirations are, because on the face of it, they might have bought into a franchise, but actually it's what the success of that is going to give them. That's the driver, whether that's time with their families, whether it's a boat in the Bahamas, whatever it might be. So in uncovering what that is and then going into the coaching with them, it really helps when the going gets tough to actually gently be that uncomfortable friend and ask permission to share with them, what we've noticed around what their behavior is, what their language is telling us, and what the impact that might be on the people and teams that they're working with, and how that can have a negative effect. So it's all very much about, creating that listening environment. Some of the feedback we've got is, I stopped managing numbers and I started coaching humans. That changed everything. Well, of course it will. If we're going to treat people as individuals and human beings, and that they're inherently whole, they're going to be so much more motivated to do what they want to do.
Rather than the Reading branch.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because they're people and not a territory.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's so easy to forget that, we can get so hung up on the numbers and the performance that actually that has a detrimental effect inadvertently. That's not what we're setting out to do, but we can fall into these habits and these patterns.
My thought familiar is that actually I think this is an act of service. And there's a similar thing in sales, isn't there, where actually acting in an act of service rather than acting in terms of what can you get. It's the same kind of tension and the same kind of dynamic here of like, okay, we're in this for long-term success. Your long-term success is our long-term success. So where is it that you're trying to get to? The other thought I had was that actually most people are quite unclear on their hopes and dreams. I'm being challenged by a business mentor outside of this at the moment to create more like a vision board, a vision statement, which reluctantly I've started to kind of draft up in here. so and it's because she's been saying, look, you need to be clear on where you're trying to get to. You need to have this vision somewhere around that's visible. Put it in the west side of your building where the sun sets, so that there's more kind of energetic power in it. But even just the act of going through that and saying, okay, I need to get clear on this. What do I actually want? And then communicating it to someone else who is a little bit removed from who doesn't have a vested interest in me per se. But that's been a good process. That's been an act of service on her part to encourage me to go and do that. And then someone else is going to understand that and say, well, this is what you said you wanted to do. These actions are not consistent with that.
I agree. I think taking the time out to do that and really give some thought to what that looks like, it then allow, I guess, the motivation that's attached to that and the feelings that you have around some of those things that slightly longer term plan is. It's crucial really to have that clarity, isn't it? So that you can work towards it. Everything that you do is linked to trying to achieve that end goal.
Do franchisees, when they sign up, kind of circumvent the hopes and dreams part because they're kind of just buying into a franchise?
So I'll answer that. It's really interesting. My experience in franchising and the conversations that are held typically in the franchise recruitment phase, all too often hopes and dreams are actually uncovered when franchise partners are in that franchise recruitment process. They tend to talk about exactly the things that are really meaningful for them, albeit it's an interesting point that you raise, Rob, as well, about your own personal vision. Because for a lot of people, actually, they haven't really thought about it.
No.
There's a whole conversation to be had around there. Another thing I should say here is that, coaching with compassion, from our perspective, again, we have tapped into the work that I already mentioned that's been undertaken from a research and personal development perspective from Richard Boyatzis, from Ellen Van Oosten, Melvin Smith, and particularly Richard Boyatzis. He's developed a methodology called the intentional change theory. And that is essentially is a process of 5 discoveries. And the first discovery being discovering one's own personal vision. So that's the first step in intentional change. And what I find really intriguing and frustrating, and I say frustrating because what we do is an act of service, and we want to serve our clients, both franchisors and franchise partners. But the reality of life and the reality of running a franchise as a new franchise partner, joining an established or emerging franchisor, it doesn't matter. The reality for me within that particular element is that even if a franchise partner has been clear about their own personal vision and their own hopes and dreams for the future, what I've seen time and time again is that once the franchise partner gets into actually launching and running the business, the challenges can be massive. The level of challenge all too often, particularly if it's somebody who's never run a business themselves before, the level of overwhelm, again, can be huge. And what I've seen all too often is that very quickly, that franchise partners can move from this feeling of excitement and energy, all about launching their own business and perhaps getting freedom from employment and, what the future is going to look like, to the reality of, oh my goodness, this is way tougher than I thought.
When am I going to get paid?
When am I going to get the money? I mean, depending on the franchise, I'm working with franchisors that people are 50, 100, 150, 200,000 pounds in, literally homes on the line, literally stress levels that are off the scale. And if we throw into that, if you just think about that for a second and we put ourselves in the franchise partner's shoes, if we've got somebody from a franchise support team, well-intentioned, well-meaning, but inadvertently creates what, again, goes back to the research, if that inadvertently creates a negative emotional attractor that leaves people feeling threatened, confidence levels dropping through the floor, feeling like I'm not good enough, I perhaps made a mistake here, maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
The problem is me, I'm broken.
Correct. And as I say, when you coach for performance in isolation, that's exactly what you can trigger. And the frustration then is actually both for the franchise support team members, because if they don't have the tools, in the worst case scenario, there are some franchisors who just literally give the franchise support team member the title of coach. And the reality for, if there is no training, if there is no support, if there is no learning on how to become an effective coach, then they're left to their own devices. And then, that relationship between franchisor and franchise partner can very quickly become frustrated, because the franchise support team members are asking the question or telling or trying to fix the person that's in front of them and saying, this is what you need to do. This is what you should do. This is what you ought to do. And those shoulds and oughts I've heard time and time and time again. But actually, we're actually doing them a disservice. That's the reality. We are doing them a disservice.
Can't fix clients, can't fix your spouse, can't fix franchise partners. The same principle holds. But you can seek to better understand.
And in the spirit of openness, my first 2 years in franchising, I tried to do exactly that and realised, I was going to say pretty quickly, maybe two years is a long time, maybe I was slow in the uptake. But it was, I realised that was not working. Physically me out supporting franchise partners, my team out supporting, and ultimately the natural conclusion, if something isn't working in that scenario, you start to blame the franchise partner. It's their fault. They're not listening to me. I've told them what to do and they're not doing it. And I now sit here. You couldn't write it. That we've got a dog barking and then we've got the doorbell.
Postman's here. Yeah. It always happens. If the postman's going to come, it's going to come on a Frenchology webinar. So, yeah, that's
exactly. But yeah, the reality, I can think back now and I can honestly think of the times whereby I gave up on franchise partners in the absence of not knowing what else to do. And I didn't.
And you lean into just recruiting more, and the next ones will be better.
Yeah. And to your point, typically, not exclusively, but typically in the vast majority of franchise partners who join a franchise, they have developed the wherewithal, and in my experience, so many of them had successful careers and have been able to, invest the sums of money that we're talking about, only to find themselves not succeeding. And from a franchisor's perspective, if you look through a very narrow lens as a franchisor, it's easy to think, well, we've developed a model. We know what the model is. We've trained the model. Why are they not doing it?
You've got people with quite big egos there as well if they've had very successful careers to date. Mm-hmm. And maybe you've got a fairly junior member of the franchise support team who's coming in and trying to coach them for performance. It doesn't strike me as a circumstance that's likely to be productive.
And it's such an easy solution to bring, have some training in how to coach with compassion. So, to start every conversation with what's one thing that's going well for you right now changes the whole conversation that follows that. And instead of saying you need to do this or you must do that, it's what's the support you need to take that next first step. So it's just turning the language around. It's not, it's not rocket science, but actually the neuroscience and all the research under it shows that this works really, really well. And you can turn them into positive conversations and remind people why they're doing this. What's the bigger picture here? So yeah, you're having a tough week. Yes, your numbers might be down, but actually what can you do? What's within your control and what support do you need to move that forward?
Now, I wanted to ask you as well, what are the characteristics of a great coach, and can anyone be a great coach? So for instance, I think I have empathy, okay, but I definitely do not have sympathy. So are there any traits that are necessary?
Most definitely. And I would say err on the side of empathy rather than sympathy, because if you've got sympathy, you're going to be drawn down into their downward spiral. So it's knowing how to be empathetic, understanding and forward facing. In answer to your question, can everyone be a coach? Probably 99% of people with the right training. And there's probably, of that, I would say probably half are called to coaching because they do it naturally. And then, like Graham was saying, you suddenly realise that there's this, all this kind of strategies and tools and techniques that you're using. They've all got names and acronyms and all these things. But actually, if you've got a desire to be of service to people, as we've touched on, you've got the makings of a good coach. And it is all about, honing those skills. So being an active listener, have some powerful questions, know how to build rapport, know how to support someone when they're not having a good time, and hold up that mirror and say, this is what you say you want to do. And look what you're showing me. Look what everybody else is seeing around that. And what do we need to do differently to get a different result?
Before we move on as well, I just wanted to mention the role of the uncomfortable friend and setting in place certain things from the beginning of the relationship rather than, I think, like, to me, it seems quite hard to transition to this coaching with compassion approach partway through an existing relationship. Like, what needs to be in place at the start?
So that's definitely, for me, whenever a coach has run into trouble, it's because the contracting has not been as robust and rigorous as it needs to be. So it's much easier at the outset of any relationship to say, this is how we're going to work together, this is what we're going to do, and to ask permission to be your uncomfortable friend. And then when a conversation comes up, when perhaps, they've agreed to do actions and we're at the second or the third coaching session and they've done nothing, it's then time to say, remember at the beginning when I asked permission to be your uncomfortable friend? Well, I'm going to do that now.
Putting
And
that
this
hat
is
on
what you
now,
need to
yeah.
hear. Yeah, exactly. So you can do it very gently. You don't have to be confrontational about it, because actually contracting to do that means that you've asked their permission, and having given their permission, they're very unlikely to say, you can't talk to me like that, or I don't want to hear it, because actually in doing that, we're being in service of them, aren't we? And helping them to achieve their dreams and desires.
I'm not a confrontational person at all, but actually for me, having that approach actually feels a lot easier because it's not as confrontational. It's not like you versus them, or now it's time for you to be the hard man type thing. I just couldn't. Yeah,
no.
I'm less likely to do it.
I'm always wary of people who say they enjoy confrontation, because why let it get to that stage? Why not nip it in the bud at the beginning and, gently point out what's not working in any relationship, not just in the coaching relationship, but all sorts of relationships.
I don't know. My wife likes a good confrontation, but that's a separate webinar. Let's move on and talk about, well, what can go wrong? So for someone who likes what we're talking about, wants to have a more compassionate human approach, when can things go wrong? And I put a couple of thoughts on the slides as a starting point, but yeah, question to anyone.
So, shall I think, one of the first things for me is that you can either take the approach which is, trial and error, and to be honest, that when I reflect on my own coaching journey, and I reflect on how well or otherwise that I performed as a coach, particularly in the early days, the reality is that you're not going to get it right every time. I think that's the first thing to say. But you can develop your skills, and it's why we are so passionate about the differentiation that we bring from, and why Franchology was created. It was to actually help, either to help those who are in the privileged position of helping others. So whether that's franchise support team members, franchise or leadership teams, franchise owners. These skills can be learned. That goes to the heart of it. Whilst I've personally learned the hard way through trial and error, actually the systems, the systemization, the process, the qualifications that we have created together, these things can be avoided. So anybody who's interested in how they might be able to develop their own coaching skills, we can certainly help with that. But I guess part of that process is about practice, and not necessarily practicing with a end user coachee client. And if I put it in those terms, you need to have the ability to be able to practice what you are learning in a safe space as a coach. And one of the things, Jeanette didn't allude to this, but Jeanette, prior to working with me and the team at Franchology, Jeanette spent 20 years as Director of Accreditation for the Association for Coaching. Now runs her own coaching association called the Universal Coaching Alliance. And as part of that, one of the huge benefits that Jeanette brings to coachees is the ability to create safe spaces where coaches can practice, but also where coaches can bring challenges in a confidential space to supervision.
Mm.
This is, I don't want to sit here and sound like I'm knocking other people, but this is what professional coaching looks like and feels like and is like. But not everybody has been exposed to that.
Sounds like the growth mindset as well, rather than the fixed mindset of I am a good coach, I'm not a good coach, I am empathetic, I'm not empathetic. It's like, well, maybe you're on a curve and maybe you need the safe space and the environment and the support.
Agreed.
Most definitely. And it's lovely, I think, for our clients as well. You know, we're humans, we're vulnerable, we don't get it right every time. And to be able to be confident enough in your own skills and ability to say, actually, that was the wrong question that I asked you there. Let me backtrack and ask you the question that I meant to ask you. Or to challenge the client to say, what's the question you don't want me to ask you right now, because very often that will uncover exactly what the challenge is and what the limiting factor or self-limiting belief is on behalf of the client. So there are ways of doing it. But for me, Graham's absolutely right. You know, we're a profession, you know, at the moment we're unregulated. So why wouldn't we raise the bar and make sure that we engage in regular supervision and that we're constantly sharpening our own saw and, you know, getting better at what we're doing? I think it's really, really crucial to what we're doing.
Would you start with yourself as the franchise network owner, or would you start with your franchise support teams? It sounds to me like these are values that can maybe filter down from the top.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there is, you know, as with all things, I think, you know, the leadership within the franchisor's business is crucial. You know, there is no point in thinking about coaching with compassion unless you are really serious about the difference that you want to make. And that fundamentally, for me, links back to purpose. Having a really clear sense of purpose, not just from the business perspective, albeit that is crucial, but also just from a personal franchise or leadership perspective. We need to be looking at this and thinking about, you know, coming back to how can we ensure that the people, the franchise partners who have entrusted us, perhaps with their life savings, you know, if they've entrusted us with everything, how can we ensure that we are delivering the right level of service back from a coaching perspective? And again, just to differentiate here, of course, I think, Jeanette, I've heard you say this many times. As an example, if someone's never driven a car before, you can't coach them to drive a car.
Yeah.
You need to teach them how to drive the car in the first place. But what you can do is, once they've got those basic skills, then you can coach them to become a better driver.
Most definitely. And I think that's where lots of people are still confused about the differences between training, coaching, mentoring, consultancy. And it's so important to know that coaching is a different, very, very different space. And I think the Coaching with Compassion framework is a very good framework to actually base that around, so that people have a clear understanding of what's the intervention that's being implemented here and how that does differ from all of the others that are out there.
I'm going to ask some obvious questions on behalf of the listener. So could we just define coaching, mentoring, teaching,
Okay.
consulting?
So shall I take that one, Graham? So teaching is obviously I'm instructing you, so I'm the expert you're going to learn. Mentoring is very much around this is the pathway that I followed. These are the things you should do. If you want to emulate me, then you follow my path. Coaching is very much around your whole, you have all the resources that you need, and let's work together. Let me walk alongside you as your coach, identify what the gaps are, where is it you want to be, and let's work out how we get from here to there. So it's very, it's not my ideas, it's not my instructions, it's very much asking you the questions in a similar way to your mentor was saying about your vision board. There are interchangeable skills and transferable skills, which is great, but in the main, coaching is very much future focused. What are you going to do? How are you going to get there? How can we support you on that journey?
Consistency on the slide, just as a point, because it feels like if you work with a coach, if you're a franchise partner and you have a coach that, let's say they go off ill for 2 months, you need to speak to someone else. Like there has to be this consistent experience, I think, where someone else can potentially drop into that and you're not left high and dry.
Most definitely. And the beauty of coaching when it's done well is that you don't create an interdependency. So what you actually do is through working with your client, ultimately they can self-coach. So the idea is a bit like years and years ago, I was told, the best managers manage themselves out of their roles. So they're not needed when they're not there. The people do what they do. I believe that coaching is the same. If we can teach you the skills and you can understand more about yourself, you can do very well without a coach once you understand what the principles are. So yes, there needs to be consistency, but ultimately we want people to go out and self-coach and get where they want to be under their own volition.
It's independence, not dependence.
Definitely.
Very good. Let's move on and just have a quick chat. So for someone who's watched this far, what specific actions can people take? I put the first item on the screen actually is to have an open door policy, but with boundaries on it. This was something Jen Chapman Buffin told me in an interview she gave for the Franchology book about being approachable, but having some boundaries on. People can't do it in the evenings, or there's certain times and places. So like, what actions can someone watching put in place to start implementing this kind of coaching with compassion approach?
Shall I start, Graham? So I think for me, the first thing is to be very curious. So what is driving the person that you're interacting with? Where do they want to be? Is it fame, fortune, money? What is it that they actually want? So once you've uncovered that, then obviously you need to actively listen. So it's no point asking great curious questions if you're forgetting to listen. That's not very good. And then it is about, so what can we do together? What are the steps we need to take? And the open door policy is a really good one. It's really simple, isn't it? If you implement an open door policy, it's when my door's open, anybody can come in, I'm ready. When it's closed, you might have to wait a little time before you can have my attention. So again, we're back to the contracting and being really clear about when things can happen. And some people love to work early in the morning. I've got clients that I work with at sort of 6:30 in the morning because they might be on the other side of the world. I've got others that would like to work with me late into the afternoon or evening. That really doesn't suit me. So if I'm going to be a best service to a client, quite often I'll refer a client on to someone who likes to work in the evenings if that's the best time for them, because it's not going to work. I'm not going to give of my best if I'm exhausted at the end of a long day. It's about boundaries and understanding what people want from that relationship as well. I think it's really important.
I can add on the active listening thing that making notes on what people are saying as they're saying it is one way of practicing that as well.
Most definitely, yeah.
Graham, over to you. What are the specific things that people can put in place?
So I think building on what's just been said as well, I think being curious about what coaching with compassion is. I mean, we are scratching the surface in some respects, I think, in terms of this particular session. But I think, going back to, for example, the intentional change theory that I mentioned a little while ago, being really clear about what the coachee's ideal self is, what that personal vision is for them for the future, but then also recognizing where are they right now? What is their real self? At what point are they at in their journey? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And what needs to be done to create a learning agenda as well? Because I think the other thing that I think is really important here is just to recognize change is not easy.
No, it feels uncomfortable sometimes, doesn't it?
100%, Claire. I think, change is ultimately to make a sustained change is we need to come out of a comfort zone. And that takes time. It takes effort. And you need, for me, that this comes back to even just understanding this point. And again, I don't want to sound patronizing as I say it, but all too often, we live in a world whereby we want and desire change to happen overnight. As a franchisor, we want franchise partners to be performing at the optimum. Back to the numbers, back to the key drivers. But ultimately, if we're talking about sustained behaviour change, then I think we need to give ourselves space as coaches, but we also need to give the coachee space as well to understand that this is about putting in place new habits, experimenting, accepting that actually we won't get this right first time. We need to be comfortable getting uncomfortable. And I think, for me, that comes back to this consistency, if you like. We've got to have this, we've got to have the right contracting, as Jeanette mentioned, but we've got to have the right consistency in place. And that includes, Boyatzis talks about the importance of resonant relationships and creating that, not just a supportive relationship with a coach, but also creating a network of trusted relationships where people can be vulnerable. And, Rob, you mentioned earlier about some of the most successful people coming with egos. And you are so right. But if the ego is actually the driving force that's in a meeting, a session, whatever, you're unlikely to get very far if you've not created that trusted, resonant relationship between coach and coachee. So, and to that end, we've already talked about the fact that, the vast majority of people can become coaches if that's what they want to do. But not everybody wants to do that either. So, and it's part of, this is not a sales pitch, but it's part of the reason why at Franchology we have and we offer to franchisors an outsourced service. We have a team of qualified, capable, competent coaches within the Franchology team who can provide that outsourced service should that be required. Yeah, I think it's about not necessarily being attached either, other than just giving the right service to the coachee. And then another example I would share, one of the byproducts that I discovered years ago through what I now know as coaching with compassion was that sometimes through the process, franchise partners, and very often franchise partners who had created adversarial relationship between them and the franchise, or again, bearing in mind this quite often goes back to the fact that, if amygdala in our brain is firing and we are feeling, threatened and we are stressed and we are in fight or flight mode, that's when, typically franchise partners will undoubtedly start to blame the franchisor.
Yeah.
And that's where disputes come from. And so what I've discovered by using these techniques is that actually you can help a franchise partner realize, or a franchisor. I've also had experience of realizing and helping franchisors to realize that, perhaps this business was not quite what they thought it was going to be, but helping people see for themselves if they're actually a square peg in a round hole, and how to facilitate a really positive exit management strategy if that's the case. There's a whole host of stuff that sits under this banner of coaching with compassion.
My systems brain keeps going back to the question of, okay, you're a coach, you've built this resonant relationship with a franchise partner who might otherwise have a substantial ego. Let's say you're not at work for a month or two. Like, what systems, what documentation? Like, surely there has to be some documentation on what the franchise partner's hopes and dreams are, what conversations you've had with them, so that someone else, in theory, has a fighting chance of maintaining that relationship.
You bring a really important point up there, Rob, because in my experience, coaching doesn't happen in a vacuum. So I always encourage my clients to share with others, whether that's their upline that are reporting into them, whether it's their managers or their peers, or even their friends and wider social circle, just to share with them that you're having coaching, because I find that, one, that helps the coaching profession kind of get out there and people understand a bit more about what coaching is through people telling their own stories. But we all need support at different times. And if the coach isn't there to provide support because of whatever reason, or your line manager isn't, then your franchise support person isn't there, I think it's really helpful to share with others so that you can continue to have those conversations and to work on your own professional development. I think it's really important.
Great. Is there anything else that we should talk about just before we wrap this one up?
I think we've covered quite a lot of ground, haven't we?
Quite a lot of ground, yes, indeed. If you've been following along with this and you'd like to work with Jeanette or Graham, the place to go to is franchology.com/start. The way that we work is we start off with what we call a holistic review. Going back to Graham's nursing analogy, we start off by figuring out, well, where is the real problem at the deepest possible root cause, on the basis that you have to know where you are before you move forwards. So to speak to Graham or Jeanette, head to franchology.com/start. There's a form to fill in there to set the ball going. We're also working on an automated version of that, which is going to be, if anyone's come across these kind of score up quiz type things, there will be a Franchology quiz where you can tell us a bit about your situation, and it will spit out a customized report based on that will give you a few things to think about, potentially as a basis for a subsequent discussion. So again, if you'd like to help us co-develop that, beta test that, again, place to go to is franchology.com/start. I'll put a link to the chat in a moment. This is what a client, Jonathan Sabater, had to say about working with Graham. So since engaging with Franchology shortly after signing our first franchise partner, our progress has been remarkable. In just 1 to 2 years, we've expanded to 10 franchise partners and have developed a comprehensive plan for continued growth, aiming to reach 150 franchise partners over the next decade. This success is directly attributable to the innovative strategies and unwavering support provided by Franchology. I will look up a different testimonial for next month, but we do have lots of clients saying similar things. So Graham, is there anything else you want to mention just about the holistic review and the process thereafter?
I think the only thing I would say is that, any initial conversation around that, just to book in for a free, without obligation, 45-minute chat, that in itself, we always aim to deliver value in whatever way we can. So there's absolutely no pressure whatsoever for anybody to think that they need to commit to anything beyond that. Very happy to have conversations. Very happy to do whatever we can do. As I said at the beginning, the Franchology purpose, our mission, is to transform franchising together. And anything that we can do, any insight that we can share, any guidance that we can give, we are absolutely committed to doing that, inside or out with any commercial relationship. So very happy to just engage and do what we can do to help.
Very good. Yeah, we got a couple of minutes left. If anyone is following along with us live, feel free to post any questions you've got for either Jeanette or either on Riverside or on LinkedIn. But yeah, I think this has been a good call. I think Claire, I just wanted to ask you, is there anything that's come up for you over the course of the conversation that
No, I was just going back to the kind of the practicing of the coaching that really resonated with me. I remember going through my coaching accreditation many years ago, and it didn't kind of, the process and the framework around the coaching, that didn't necessarily feel, I definitely had to practice a lot. But that's fine, isn't it? I think that, having that structure and working with family, and literally a couple of weeks ago, Graham had said to me, you've been coaching me through this, just before we'd logged on to something, and I didn't even realize that I'd done it. So I think over time that does, those skills and that kind of questioning that you just naturally occurs over a period of time, and you don't always realize it, but yeah, sometimes. And the uncomfortable thing, the uncomfortable friend thing, I love that as well, just getting the permission at the start and saying sometimes this is going to feel a little bit awkward, but that's okay, we just need to have those conversations. Yeah, no, it's been good, been a great session.
Thanks so much. Jeanette, where can people find you outside of
So at the universalcoachingalliance.org. So that's Jeanette with 2 N's. If you miss out an N, you'll think I'm not talking to you, and it isn't that at all. It's just easy to find me. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, we'll wrap this one up here. Thanks for joining us. We'll be doing this again in a month. Topic currently to be confirmed, but to be confirmed quite shortly. So yeah, make sure if you just discovered this, make sure you're connected to Graham. We'll get an invite out to you for next month. And yeah, again, if there are franchising topics, franchising questions that you want us to discuss around the subjects of either franchisee attraction or profitability, or just relationships, having resonance relationships in general, yeah, then let us know.
Reach out, let us know for sure. Yeah, pop any of us a message.
Okay, well, thanks Jeanette, thanks Graham, thanks Claire.
Thank you.
And, yeah,
Thank you.
We'll do it again in a month.
Your timing is impeccable.
You've done this before.
I've been watching. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Very good. Thanks, guys.
See you.